Ever wonder what makes someone think they're above tradition, above respect, even above the very institutions that have guarded our civilization for centuries? Maybe it's the modern age of instant gratification that convinces some people their personal convenience outweighs centuries of protocol. Or perhaps it's the entire belief that money and status put them beyond the reach of rules that apply to everyone else. But as we saw today, some lessons come at a higher price than designer outfits and legal fees. I'm Sarah, just an average American, and what I witnessed at Buckingham Palace today really struck a chord with me. I want to share the story of Karen, who learned the hard way that the royal guards aren't just part of a tourist show, and that tradition and discipline don't bow to entitlement. That day, like any other tourist, I was in the crowd waiting to watch the changing of the guard ceremony at Buckingham Palace. The sun was shining on the palace's magnificent stones, and there was a palpable excitement in the air, everyone eager to witness this historic moment. Suddenly, the sharp click of high heels against the cobblestones cut through the murmur of the crowd, announcing Deborah Whitmore's arrival. Her meticulously maintained blonde hair and luxury athleisure were marked her as someone who considered herself above the average tourist. "Excuse me," she barked, shouldering past an elderly couple who were patiently waiting their turn for photos. "Some of us have places to be." Her designer handbag swung carelessly, nearly striking a small child who quickly ducked behind his mother. "The line starts back there, ma'am," a palace attendant politely informed her, gesturing to the orderly queue of visitors. Deborah's perfectly manicured hand sliced through the air, dismissing his words before they could fully land. "Do you know who I am?" she demanded, her voice carrying the entitled edge of someone who'd never been told no. "I'm not standing in line like some common tourist. I have a lunch reservation at the Ritz in 40 minutes. The attendant maintained his professional composure. "I apologize, ma'am, but for security reasons, all visitors must." "Security reasons?" Deborah's laugh was sharp enough to draw stares. "For what? Those toy soldiers playing dress-up?" She gestured dismissively toward the palace gates. "This whole thing is just a tourist trap anyway. I'm here to take a quick photo for my..." She caught herself, remembering she was too sophisticated for social media mentions. A young family from Australia tried to edge past her, their excited children pointing at the palace guards in the distance. Deborah planted herself firmly in their path. "I wasn't finished here," she announced, as if the entire courtyard were her private photo studio. "Please, miss," the father began, "the children have been waiting all morning." "Well, they can wait a bit longer, can't they?" Deborah's voice dripped with condescension. "Honestly, people these days have no concept of proper etiquette." The irony of her statement was lost on no one but herself. In the distance, the first notes of martial music drifted across the palace grounds. The changing of the guard was about to begin, but Deborah Whitmore had already decided that centuries of tradition would have to bend to her schedule. Little did she know, she was about to learn a very different lesson about proper etiquette, one that would leave a far more lasting impression than any photograph. As the ceremonial music grew louder, tourists began shifting positions, their cameras ready to capture the time-honored tradition. Deborah, however, remained rooted in her chosen spot, now directly in the path where the guards would soon march. "Ma'am," a retired serviceman stepped forward, his blazer adorned with campaign medals that spoke of real service. "You'll need to move back. The guards will be coming through here shortly." "Oh, please." Deborah rolled her eyes, adjusting her designer sunglasses. "They can walk around me. I'm not moving until I get my perfect shot." She pulled out her phone, holding it at various angles while completely ignoring the growing concern around her. The veteran's weathered face tightened. "These aren't actors, ma'am," he said. "They're active-duty soldiers performing their sworn duty. The path they march isn't just tradition. It's their assigned route under orders." "Orders?" Deborah's laugh was sharp enough to make several children flinch. "Orders to march in funny hats. To stand still like statues? Please." She waved her hand dismissively at his medals. "I suppose you used to play dress-up too." A ripple of disapproval moved through the crowd. The veteran's companion, another former serviceman, placed a steadying hand on his friend's shoulder. "Save your breath, John," he said. "Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." In the distance, the guards' precise footsteps could be heard approaching. Their rhythmic march carried the weight of centuries. Leading them was Guard James Windsor, his bearing perfect, his dedication evident in every measured step. Even from afar, there was something about his presence that made most tourists instinctively step back, something that spoke of real military experience behind the ceremonial uniform. "Last warning," a palace security officer called out, his tone urgent. "Clear the path immediately. The guards will not stop or deviate from their route." "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Deborah's voice rose, drawing even more attention. "This is a public space. I pay my taxes. Well, my husband does, and I have every right to stand wherever I want." She turned to address the growing crowd, as if expecting support. "This is ridiculous. They're just guards at a tourist attraction. What are they going to do? Walk through me?" The marching grew closer. Windsor's unit had rounded the corner, their scarlet uniforms a stark contrast against the palace's gray stones. Their disciplined formation and unwavering focus made it clear this was no tourist show. These were soldiers performing their duty. "Please," a mother with 2 young children pleaded. "You're going to get hurt." They're not allowed to stop or change course. Deborah's response was to plant her feet more firmly, raising her phone higher. "Then they better learn some customer service skills," she declared. "I'm not moving for anyone in a costume, no matter how fancy their little hats are." The drums grew louder, the marching more distinct. The crowd had pulled back, leaving Deborah isolated in a pocket of space that would soon be filled by advancing guards. The veteran shook his head slowly, recognition in his eyes. He'd seen this type of entitled behavior before, and he knew exactly how it would end. Guard Windsor's eyes, trained by years of service to assess situations instantly, had already registered the obstruction in their path. But his step never faltered. His bearing never changed. The formation moved forward with the inevitability of tradition itself, closing the distance between ceremony and consequences. "This is your final warning." The security officer's voice carried real urgency now. "Clear the path, or you will be forcibly removed." "Try it," Deborah shot back, her stance becoming more defiant with each passing second. "I'd love to see you explain that to my lawyer." She raised her phone higher, completely oblivious to the fact that she was about to become an object lesson in respect, one that would be significantly more memorable than any photo she hoped to capture. The distance between Guard Windsor's unit and Deborah had shrunk to mere yards, yet she remained planted in their path, her phone held high with defiant determination. The rhythmic thunder of their boots against the ancient stones seemed to make the very air vibrate with authority. "Make way for the Queen's Guard!" The command rang out clear and sharp across the courtyard. Still, Deborah stood her ground, a smirk playing across her lips as she watched the approaching formation through her phone screen. "Last chance!" Someone called from the crowd. "They're not going to stop!" "Oh, please!" Deborah called back without lowering her phone. "This isn't some military base. This is a tourist spot, and I'm a paying visitor." She raised her voice, directing it at the approaching guards. "You lot work for us. Remember, the public. Time to learn some basic customer." The collision, when it came, was precise and controlled, yet still forceful enough to send Deborah sprawling. Guard Windsor's shoulder barge, executed with military precision, struck her just hard enough to remove her from the formation's path. Her designer sunglasses went flying in one direction, her phone in another, as she landed unceremoniously on the cobblestones. But fate wasn't finished teaching its lesson. As the formation continued their unwavering march, Guard Windsor's boot came down squarely on Deborah's outstretched hand, the one she'd flung out to break her fall. The impact wasn't cruel or deliberate. It was simply the inevitable result of an immovable force encountering an object that refused to move. Her scream of outrage and pain shattered the ceremonial atmosphere. "You broke my hand." She scrambled to her knees, cradling her injured hand against her chest. "Did everyone see that? He assaulted me. That thug deliberately attacked me." The guards marched on, their formation unbroken, their discipline unwavering. Windsor's eyes remained fixed forward, his bearing as perfect as if nothing had occurred. The only evidence of the incident was a slight scuff on his otherwise immaculate boot. "How dare you?" Deborah struggled to her feet, her designer outfit now bearing the marks of her encounter with the courtyard stones. "Stop right now. I'm talking to you." Her voice rose to a shriek as the formation continued its precise march, completely ignoring her existence. "Do you know who my husband is? I'll have your job for this." The veteran who had warned her earlier stepped forward, offering a steadying hand, which she angrily slapped away. "Don't touch me. I want the police. I want names. I want badges." Her face had turned an alarming shade of red, matching the guards' uniforms. "That man attacked me. He used excessive force. I could have been killed." "Ma'am," the palace security officer approached, his tone professionally neutral despite having witnessed her ignore multiple warnings. "You were advised repeatedly to clear the path. The Queen's Guard are authorized to remove any obstacles in their assigned route." "Obstacles?" Deborah's voice reached a new pitch of indignation. "I am a tax-paying citizen. That man," she pointed at Guard Windsor retreating back, "assaulted me. He stomped on my hand. I demand he be arrested immediately." A small crowd had gathered around her, though not with the sympathy she clearly expected. Several tourists who had captured the incident on their phones were shaking their heads. The veteran stood nearby, his face a mask of professional neutrality that did little to hide his lack of surprise at the outcome. "I want his name," Deborah continued, her voice echoing off the palace walls. "James Windsor, fine. I'll remember that. My husband's lawyers will make sure he never works in uniform again. I'll own this whole palace by the time we're done." The formation had reached their destination, executing a perfect turn with the precision that came from countless hours of drill practice. Guard Windsor stood at his new post, his bearing perfect, his dedication to duty unshaken by the minor disturbance behind him. "Ma'am," the security officer tried again, "if you'd like to file a formal complaint, we can." "Complaint?" Deborah snatched up her fallen phone, checking it frantically for damage. "I'm going to do more than complain. I'm going to sue. I'm going to have the media here. Everyone will know how these thugs in fancy dress treat innocent women." She jabbed a finger toward Guard Windsor's post. "That man is a menace. He's dangerous. He should be in prison, not playing soldier at a tourist attraction." The veteran exchanged glances with his companion, both men recognizing the familiar pattern of entitled behavior meeting immovable authority. They had seen it before, civilian arrogance colliding with military discipline, always with the same result. "The police have been called, ma'am," the security officer informed her, his tone making it unclear whether this was for her benefit or because of her behavior. "They'll be here shortly to take your statement." He paused, choosing his next words carefully, "and to discuss the matter of interfering with the Queen's Guard in the performance of their duties." "Interfering?" Deborah's voice reached a pitch that made nearby pigeons take flight. "They interfered with me. That thug," she jabbed a finger toward Guard Windsor's post, "assaulted me. Look at my hand." She thrust her manicured fingers toward the security officer's face. "This is assault battery, excessive use of force." Two police officers had arrived on the scene, their expressions suggesting they dealt with similar situations before. The female officer stepped forward, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Sarah Reedus. Can you please lower your voice and explain what happened?" "What happened?" Deborah's laugh was borderline hysterical. "I'll tell you exactly what happened. Your precious guard attacked an innocent woman. He body slammed me to the ground and then stomped on my hand. I want him arrested immediately." The male officer, Officer Thompson, was already speaking with witnesses. The veteran and his companion provided their accounts, along with several tourists who had captured the entire incident on their phones. Their statements painted a markedly different picture than Deborah's version of events. "Ma'am, Officer Mitchell tried again. Multiple witnesses state you were warned repeatedly to clear the ceremonial path." "Oh, ceremonial path." Deborah spat the words like they were poison. "This isn't some military zone. This is a tourist attraction. I paid good money to visit this overrated palace, and that man," another enraged gesture toward Guard Windsor, "thinks he can assault me because of some ridiculous tradition." She fumbled with her phone, her injured hand shaking with rage. "I've got lawyers on speed dial, the best lawyers in London. When I'm done, that guard will be lucky to find work as a mall cop." Her fingers flew across the screen. "And wait until the media hears about this. Guard attacks innocent tourists. That'll make a lovely headline, won't it?" Officer Thompson rejoined them, his notepad filled with witness statements. "Mrs. Whitmore, according to multiple accounts, you were given at least 6 separate warnings to clear the path. The guard's actions were within established protocols for removing obstacles during ceremonial duties." Obstacles? Deborah's face flushed an even deeper shade of red. "I am not an obstacle. I am a paying visitor. And stop calling it ceremonial duties like it's some sort of real job. They're glorified tourist attractions walking around in those ridiculous hats, pretending to be soldiers." "They are soldiers, ma'am," the veteran interjected, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had served. "Active duty military personnel performing their assigned duties under orders. The ceremonial aspect doesn't change that fact. Did I ask for your opinion?" Deborah rounded on him. "Why don't you go play dress-up with them, since you're so fond of their little marching game?" She turned back to the officers, her voice rising again. "Are you going to arrest him or not?" Officer Mitchell's voice remained professionally neutral. "Ma'am, based on the witness statements and your own admission of refusing to clear a designated military patrol route, we will not be arresting Guard Windsor. However, we do need to discuss your actions today." "My actions?" Deborah's screech echoed off the palace walls. "I was assaulted. Look at my hand. Look at my clothes." She gestured at the dirt marks on her designer outfit. "This outfit costs more than that guard makes in a month. I demand compensation. I demand justice." A small crowd of tourists had maintained a respectful distance, watching the scene unfold. Several children hid behind their parents, while others openly stared at the spectacle of entitlement meeting its match. The veteran and his companion stood nearby, their presence a silent reminder of the real military authority behind the ceremonial facade. "This isn't over," Deborah declared, jabbing her phone toward Guard Windsor's immobile form. "You hear me? This isn't over. I'm going to make sure everyone knows what kind of thugs they've got guarding this place." She turned back to the officers. "I want his full name, his service number, and his commanding officer's contact information now." Officer Thompson cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you'd like to file a formal complaint, we can direct you to the appropriate channels. However, I should inform you that interfering with the Queen's Guard in the performance of their duties is a criminal offense." "Criminal offense?" Deborah's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "The only criminal here is that uniformed thug. And if you won't arrest him, I'll make sure my husband's lawyers handle this. We'll see how tough he looks when he's explaining himself in court." The sharp sound of boots on stone announced the arrival of Guard Captain Roberts, his bearing carrying the unmistakable authority of a career soldier. The polished brass of his insignia caught the afternoon sun as he surveyed the scene before him, taking in Deborah's disheveled appearance and the resigned expressions of the police officers. "What seems to be the problem here?" His voice, though quiet, carried the kind of authority that made everyone except Deborah stand a little straighter. Finally, Deborah thrust herself forward, her injured hand cradled dramatically against her chest. "Someone in charge. I demand the immediate arrest of Guard James Windsor for assault and battery. He attacked me without provocation and—" Mrs. Whitmore, Captain Roberts cut through her tirade with military precision. I've already been briefed on the situation. My guard acted entirely within protocol when you refused to clear a designated military route after multiple warnings. Protocol? Deborah's voice rose again. He body-checked me to the ground. He stomped on my hand. What kind of protocol is that? The captain's face remained impassive. The Queen's Guard are active-duty military personnel operating under strict orders. They are authorized to remove obstacles from their path using necessary force. The level of force used is precisely calculated and practiced extensively. Are you actually defending this? Deborah's face contorted with rage. Do you have any idea who my husband is? Your husband's identity is irrelevant to this situation, madam. Captain Roberts interrupted, his tone suggesting he dealt with similar threats before. What is relevant is your deliberate interference with a military unit performing its duties. Officer Mitchell stepped forward, notebook still in hand. Captain, we've collected statements from multiple witnesses confirming that Mrs. Whitmore ignored repeated warnings and deliberately positioned herself in the guard's path. Of course, they're all backing each other up. Deborah's voice echoed off the palace walls. This whole place is just one big boys' club with fancy uniforms. Well, let me tell you something, Captain. Whatever your name is, this isn't some military dictatorship. You can't just assault civilians because they're in your precious path. The captain's response was measured, each word carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. Mrs. Whitmore, the Queen's Guard are not a tourist attraction. They are serving military personnel performing vital security duties. Their ceremonial role does not diminish their authority or their responsibility to maintain their designated patrol routes. Security duties? Deborah's laugh was bitter. Please, I saw more security at my local shopping center. At least they know how to treat paying customers with respect. This is not a shopping center, madam. Captain Roberts' voice took on an edge of steel. This is a working royal residence and military installation. The guards you see are combat-trained soldiers who have earned their positions through years of dedicated service. Guard Windsor himself served 2 tours in Afghanistan before being selected for this duty. Oh, spare me the military fairy tales. Deborah snapped, waving her phone like a weapon. Wait until social media hears about this. Combat-trained soldier attacks defenseless woman. That'll look great in the headlines, won't it? Captain Roberts clasped his hands behind his back, his posture impeccable. Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps you're unaware that interfering with the Queen's Guard is a criminal offense under Section 28 of the Armed Forces Act. Officer Mitchell, Officer Thompson, I believe this falls under your jurisdiction now. You can't be serious. Deborah's voice faltered slightly for the first time. You're actually going to charge me after one of your toy soldiers attacked me. Guard Windsor executed his duty exactly as trained. The captain continued unmoved. The fact that you suffered minor injuries as a direct result of your own refusal to comply with lawful orders is unfortunate, but entirely of your own making. Deborah's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. Lawful orders? I'm a civilian. You can't give me orders. This is assault, plain and simple, and I will not rest until... Officer Mitchell. Captain Roberts turned to the officer, effectively dismissing Deborah's continued protests. I'll have my office forward you the relevant security footage and duty logs. I trust you can handle things from here. This is outrageous. Deborah's voice cracked with fury. You can't just ignore me. I demand to speak to whoever's in charge of this entire operation. Someone higher up than you. Captain Roberts turned back to her, his expression unchanged, but his voice carrying a final note of authority. Mrs. Whitmore, this incident is now a police matter. I suggest you direct your complaints through the proper legal channels. In the meantime, I recommend you reflect on the seriousness of interfering with military personnel in the execution of their duties. Right then, Mrs. Whitmore, Officer Mitchell stepped forward, her demeanor professional but firm. We'll need you to accompany us to the station to formally process this incident. Process? Deborah's eyes widened with disbelief. Process what? I'm the victim here. You can't possibly. You have 2 options. Officer Thompson interjected. "You can come voluntarily to provide your statement, or we can formally arrest you for interfering with military personnel and disturbing the peace. Your choice." The veteran who had tried to warn her earlier stepped forward one last time. "Ma'am, if I may, sometimes accepting responsibility for our actions is the better part of valor." Responsibility? Deborah clutched her designer bag like a shield. The only one responsible is that thug in the red costume. This is absolutely. She stopped mid-sentence as Officer Mitchell produced a pair of handcuffs. "You wouldn't dare, Mrs. Whitmore." Captain Roberts spoke one final time, his voice carrying the weight of generations of military discipline. "Your actions today demonstrated a profound disrespect, not just for the uniform, but for the principles it represents. These guards are not actors in a tourist show. They are soldiers who have bled for their country, who stand ready to defend it at a moment's notice. The ceremony you mock is built on centuries of sacrifice and dedication. I don't care about your ceremonies." Deborah's voice had taken on a hint of desperation. "This is assault, battery, false arrest. My husband's lawyers will." "Your husband's lawyers will find," Officer Mitchell cut in smoothly, "that every action taken today was fully within the law. Now, shall we proceed to the station, or do I need to read you your rights?" Deborah looked around wildly, but found no sympathy in the surrounding faces. The crowd that had witnessed her behavior watched in silence as she was led away, still protesting loudly about lawyers and lawsuits and social media revenge. Captain Roberts turned to address the gathered tourists, his voice carrying clear authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this incident. Please remember that while we welcome visitors to witness our ceremonies, these are not mere performances. Every guard you see here has earned their position through years of dedicated service. They represent the finest traditions of the British military, and we expect visitors to respect both their duty and their authority." As the crowd began to disperse, the two veterans exchanged knowing looks. The older one touched his campaign medals thoughtfully. Some people, he mused, never learn the difference between authority and entertainment. His companion nodded, watching as Deborah's continued protests faded into the distance. "Pride comes before a fall," he replied quietly, "and some falls are harder than others." Guard Windsor remained at his post, his bearing perfect, his discipline unshaken by the incident. The afternoon sun glinted off his brass buttons and polished boots, the same boots that had taught an entitled tourist a lesson about respect she wouldn't soon forget. The palace grounds returned to their normal routine, the ancient stones having witnessed yet another clash between civilian arrogance and military discipline. The outcome, as always, had been inevitable, a reminder that some traditions endure not because they're relics of the past, but because they represent timeless values of duty, honor, and respect. What makes someone think they're above tradition, above respect, above the very institutions that have stood guard over our civilization for centuries? Maybe it's the modern age of instant gratification that convinces some people their personal convenience outweighs centuries of protocol. Or perhaps it's the entitled belief that money and status put them beyond the reach of rules that apply to everyone else. But as we saw today, some lessons come at a higher price than designer outfits and legal fees. The Royal Guards aren't actors in a historical reenactment or theme park entertainers. They are highly trained soldiers carrying on a tradition of service that stretches back through generations. Their discipline isn't for show, and their authority isn't up for negotiation. Next time you visit Buckingham Palace or any historical institution, remember this: respect isn't just about following rules. It's about understanding that some things are bigger than our individual wants or conveniences. The guard standing watch today may have served in Afghanistan yesterday and could be deployed tomorrow. The ceremony you witness isn't just for tourists. It's a living link to centuries of service and sacrifice. So, we want to hear from you. Have you ever seen someone mistaking authority for entertainment, treating those in uniform as if they were there for amusement rather than duty? How would you have handled this situation if you were in the crowd? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every comment and love hearing your perspectives. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to show your support. Hit the like button to let us know you want more content like this. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. We bring you incredible tales of discipline, bravery, and the lessons behind these time-honored traditions every single day. Turn on the notification bell so you're always the first to see our latest uploads. Share this video with your friends and family who might appreciate the deeper meaning behind these traditions. Your support helps us keep creating more content like this. And if you can't get enough of these incredible stories, watch more of our videos about the royal guards and their encounters with those who underestimate them. You'll find a link to our playlist in the description below. Thank you for watching and being part of this amazing community. Your engagement, your insights, and your respect for these traditions mean everything. Until next time, remember respect isn't outdated, and some lessons are best learned through those who stand guard, not just over palaces, but over the very principles that make civilization possible. See you in the next video.